Have you ever heard of a country declaring war on a bunch of birds and then somehow losing? Well, grab your popcorn because today we're diving into one of history's most bizarre and frankly hilarious episodes, the Great Emu War of 1932. Picture this. It's post-World War I Australia. The government has settled thousands of veteran soldiers in Western Australia, giving them land to farm wheat. It was a tough life, made even tougher by the Great Depression. But their biggest problem wasn't the economy. It was a feathered menace. After their breeding season, a massive army of about 20,000 emus decided to migrate inland. And what did they find on their journey? An all-you-can-eat buffet, courtesy of our veteran farmers. These giant, flightless birds, standing up to 6 feet tall and running at 30 miles per hour, descended upon the wheat fields like a plague. They trampled fences, devoured crops, and basically threw a giant bird party at the farmers' expense. The farmers, many of them ex-soldiers, were desperate. They appealed to the government for help. They even sent a deputation to meet the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pearce. Their request was simple but unusual. They wanted machine guns. Yes, you heard that right. Machine guns to fight birds. Sir George Pearce, perhaps seeing a unique PR opportunity, agreed. He figured, hey, our soldiers can get some target practice and we'll get some good press for helping the farmers. So he dispatched a small military unit, commanded by Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery. Their arsenal? 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The stage was set for the Great Emu War. On November 2nd, 1932, the first battle commenced. The soldiers spotted a flock of about 50 emus. This should be easy, right? Just point and shoot. Well, not quite. The emus were surprisingly clever. They were out of range for the machine guns. So the locals tried to herd the birds into an ambush. The emus, however, had other plans. They split into small groups and scattered, making them incredibly difficult targets. The first volley of gunfire was mostly useless. A few birds were taken down, but the rest just ran off, completely unfazed. A couple of days later, the soldiers had a new strategy. They spotted a huge flock of over 1,000 emus near a local dam. This was their chance. They set up the machine gun, took aim, and were ready to unleash chaos. But just as they were about to fire, the gun jammed. The emus, probably sensing their good luck, scattered in all directions before the soldiers could even fix the weapon. By the end of the day, the official report stated only about a dozen birds were killed. It was a total failure. Major Meredith was starting to realize he'd underestimated his enemy. In his notes, he expressed a newfound respect for these avian adversaries. He famously said, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. They can face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks." He compared their guerrilla tactics to those of the Zulus. These weren't just dumb birds, they were feathered tacticians. The soldiers tried everything. They mounted a machine gun on a truck to chase the emus down. It sounds like something out of a cartoon, and it was just as ridiculous in reality. The ride was so bumpy that the gunner couldn't get a single shot off. At one point, an emu got tangled in the truck's steering gear, causing the driver to swerve and crash through a fence. The emu, of course, broke free and ran away. The truck was out of commission, and the soldiers were left looking utterly defeated. After about a week of this feathered fiasco, the media got hold of the story. The press had a field day. Headlines mocked the military's inability to defeat a flock of birds. One British commentator wryly noted that the emus had won every round so far. The public debate was fierce. A conservationist in the Australian Parliament argued that the emus were the native inhabitants and the soldiers were the intruders. The whole operation was becoming a national embarrassment. Faced with mounting pressure and a comical lack of success, the Minister of Defense ordered a withdrawal. On November 8th, just 6 days after it began, the first campaign of the Great Emu War was over. The military had used nearly 2,500 rounds of ammunition to kill. Well, the numbers are debated, but estimates range from a measly 50 to a few hundred birds. With 20,000 emus still roaming free, it was a decisive victory for the birds. But the story doesn't end there. The farmers were still being terrorized by the emus, who were emboldened by their victory. The pleas for help started up again. So, believe it or not, Major Meredith and his men were sent back out for round 2 on November 13th. This time, they were a little more successful. They changed their tactics, opting for more strategic ambushes rather than open field chases. Over the next month, they managed to kill nearly 1,000 emus, but it was a grueling, costly effort. The military reported using about 10 rounds of ammunition for every confirmed kill. It was incredibly inefficient. By mid-December, Meredith was recalled, and the military operation was officially over. Even with the slightly better results of the second campaign, it was clear that a military solution wasn't the answer. The emu population was still massive, and the cost was just too high. The government ultimately decided to implement a bounty system instead, which proved to be far more effective in the long run. In one 6-month period in 1934, over 57,000 bounties were claimed. So, who really won the Great Emu War? While the military did eventually manage to take down a good number of birds, the initial failure, the public ridicule, and the ultimate retreat have cemented this event in history as a loss for Australia. The emus, through their sheer resilience and surprisingly effective tactics, had successfully defended their territory against machine guns. The Great Emu War remains a perfect example of how sometimes the most well-laid plans of men can be foiled by the simple, unpredictable forces of nature. It's a quirky, strange, and hilarious footnote in military history that reminds us not to underestimate our opponents, especially when they have feathers and can run faster than a truck on a bumpy road. It's a story so bizarre, it just has to be true. So, the next time you see an emu, give it a little nod of respect. You're looking at the descendants of undefeated war veterans. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this wild piece of history, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more strange stories, and let me know in the comments what other historical oddities you'd like me to cover. See you next time.